Okay. So what we discussed at a previous session, we saw that how to work with a validation mode, right? Now, so we'll jump into the interesting topic. So in Snowflake, in Snowflake, we have one feature called table types. Just observe this, guys. We have table types. Now, so what it mean by the table types, and then why we are going to use table types. We have different table types here. If you observe here, see this, whatever the table till now we have created, right? All these are your permanent tables, permanent tables. All these tables are permanent tables. Okay. Now we have transient tables. We have other types of tables, transient tables and temporary tables. These are the other table types is available in Snowflake. Whatever the table we are creating, that table by default it will be fall into permanent tables. Another tables are transient tables and then temporary tables. What is the difference here? What is temporary table? What is transient table? So we'll see that. Just a minute.
Sir,
Hi Dinesh, we are not able to hear you.
yeah.
Yes, sir, it's pretty silent.
I'm sorry, it went to mute. I'm very sorry, guys. Okay. So now, everyone can able to hear me, and then you can view my screen also, right? Okay. Sorry, I didn't notice. I'm sorry for that. Okay. So now what we are telling is, what we are discussing is, we have three types. We three table types basically: permanent, transient, and then temporary. Permanent, transient, temporary. These permanent applicable for database and it's applicable for schema and it is applicable for tables. All this level permanent is applicable. So like schema it is applicable, database it is applicable, tables it is applicable. Now permanent will have retention period. You will have 90 days retention period maximum and you will have a fail safe option. This is related to permanent. Now coming to transient, so this is applicable for database and applicable for schema and applicable for tables. Applicable for tables. And coming to this, these things, so when it is applicable for this particular transient, this is you will have retention period, retention period only 1 day max. only one day. And you will not have fail safe for the retention period. You will not have fail safe for the retention period. Okay. Another one. You have temporary, right? This is applicable only for tables. This is not applicable for database, not applicable for your schema, only applicable for tables, temporary. And here, this one you will have retention period. Retention here also period, it will be 1 day. But here also you have retention period 1 day. Here also you have retention period 1 day. But what is the difference? And one more thing, it is applicable only for a session. It is applicable only for a session. Based on our requirement, we are going to use temporary tables, transient tables, or so these permanent tables. Always permanent tables will be retention. It is retention period will be 90 days. Permanent tables and fail safe will be available. Always this is the default one. When you create a table by default, it will go to this permanent. Coming to transient, retention period is 1 day, and temporary retention period 1 day, and then it is only applicable for session. Session means once you log out your account, you this particular Snowflake account. So once you log out and then log in, that table will be gone. It means automatically it is dropped. Temporary table, automatically it is going to be dropped. Now let's come to this one. So when you observe this, so this is applicable for database and schema. Okay. First, let's understand these two things like database and then this schema or tables. So for the permanent and transient, until you drop, it will be available. Now, if you observe the tables we created last week, so it is available, right? The database what we created, it is available. Schema what we created, it is available, right? If you observe, simple thing, show tables. So this one, if you want to see all the tables here in this particular any database or any schema, you can give show tables. Let's connect it to this particular one. Now it's connected to class database public schema. Now observe this one. When you click on show tables, see this, what it is telling. All the tables it is showing table kind. Observe this table kind. And most importantly, observe retention period. What we discussed, retention period maximum is 90 days. Maximum is 90 days, right? Here retention period maximum is 1 day. Here retention period maximum is 1 day. Now for all the tables, minimum retention period is 0. And default is, just remember this is interview question, 1 day. And maximum is 90 for permanent and 1 day for your transient and and temporary. Understand, right? This is 1 day for transient temporary. This is the maximum. And default for all the tables 0. Sorry, default is 1. Minimum is 1. This is the retention. Okay, you are talking about, so retention, we are discussing about retention. What it means by the retention? What exactly it will do? It means suppose something was happened. It means completely your database is gone. Whatever you have created the cloud, it is gone. Then how to recover that, right? That period, we will call it as a retention period. Within how many days you can able to get back your things, that is your retention period. It means kind of versioning also, we can say that. How many days back you can able to go back and then you can able to see the data. Based on retention period, you will have time travel. You will have time travel option. We will discuss that. Now, based on the retention period, we will have a time travel and how to create a retention period for the different tables. We will see that. So, but just remember, so retention period will be there. Based on retention period, your time travel will work. For example, so retention period, let's observe this. If you give 5 days, okay, just observe this. If you give 5 days retention period, let's assume that EMP table you have created on this first, okay, on this first you created. When you created, you have given retention is 5. Observe this carefully. This is very important. You have given 5 days retention period when you created a table. It means, so what will happen is always you can able to go back and then you can able to so get back the data so till 5 days. It means you can go back. It's kind of versioning, right? You can go back and then you can so replace the data. So within that 5 days, any day you can go back and then you can so get the data. And so let's observe this example. So we have EMP and then first we created the table. Okay. On same EMP table, what we have done is on second we have inserted 10 records, and the same time this is second, February 1st and so March 1st and March 2nd, and March 3rd what we have done is we have deleted 2 records. What we have done, we deleted 2 records, and again what we will do is we will take on 4th, again inserted around 20 records, assume that. Then on 5th what you have done is means you are doing some changes, you are implementing some changes on the table, right? So let's take it as a 5th, okay, and you have updated maybe some 3 records, okay. Now on 6th, let's assume that here on 6th again you have deleted 3 records, okay. Now finally, if you check the data in the table, what will be there? After all this transaction on everyday basis, suppose we have a data in a table, EMP table, right? So from the date of creation to till date, we have done so many changes, right? Now, our intention is I want to go back and then I want to see, so on table creation date, how the table looks like. Now here, example. So now, so the here, so today, if you observe, so I have, so after all this transaction, I have a data in the table. But I want to go back and then I want to check how the data looks like on exactly on the third. Okay. Now, this particular snapshot, it means you can go back to any specific day and then you can able to check the data within retention period. Within that retention period only. Understand, right? So you cannot able to go back and you can check snapshot of the table. So within, so how many after retention period? It means what is the retention period here? We have 5 days retention period, right? So when you have 5 days retention period, what you can do is, see this one. Now assume that you are on 6th. One, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Only 5 days, right? Suppose if you are on 9th, so you only, so next 5 days till here, right? You can able to go back and then you can able to see the data. But this is nothing but a snapshot. But actual data will be available in the table. But if you want to go back 5 days before how the data looks like, it's simple thing. Okay, I will give you an example like this. Suppose when you have mm, a picture of yours, okay, when you have a snapshot of yours picture 1 week before, what it tells you, how you are looking 1 week before, right? If you have a picture of yours 1 month before you taken a like selfie in your mobile, 1 month before, it will tell you 1 month before how you are looking, right? Same way, 6 months before, it will tell you 6 months before how you are looking. But currently, how you are looking is that is different. So it will be there, right? So you can see that in the, so at this current moment of time, how you are looking, that is fine. But what you are expecting here, so 1 week before or 10 days before, how you are looking, right? If you have a snapshot, then only we can able to, so go and then you can able to see that, right? That snapshot kind of thing, we will call it as a retention period here. You can able to go back and then you can able to check the data. So within that retention period, right? That is nothing but retention. Okay, based on this, your time travel will depend based on the retention period. Okay, if you have 1 day retention period, okay, suppose something happened within this retention period, you can, within the retention period, you can able to get back. It means, suppose you dropped the table, your retention period is 5 days, then within that particular period you can able to go and you can able to undrop the data within the retention period only. If you have 1 day retention period, within 1 day you can able to undraw, you can able to get back the data. It means you can able to restore the data if something happens to that particular table or database or schema. We can able to restore the within how many days we can able to restore. Suppose today it has dropped. If I give 5 days retention period, if I identified this, that table is dropped within the next 5 days, then I can able to get it back. More than that, it is not possible. That is nothing but a retention period. Within how many days we can able to restore? We can able to restore. That is nothing but retention. Based on that, the time travel also applicable. We will come to that in the next session. What is time travel? Now today, let's see. So how to work with a different table types, how to create a permanent table, how to create a transient, how to create a temporary, and database and schema also. Permanent database, permanent schema. Okay. So permanent schema, temporary database, temporary schema. Now whatever we are creating in our database, So if you don't mention anything, database we created, schema also we created. By default, those are permanent. For example, if you want to see the databases, show databases. Okay. Observe this, we have a database, class, and then remaining other databases is available, right? Observe, so the current, right? So, and then observe the retention period by default, it is 1, right? It is 1. Now, whenever you create any database, any schema, any table, by default, it will be a permanent. By default, it will be a permanent. Within that permanent database, within that permanent database, if you create anything, that will be also permanent only. It means if you create schema, by default, it will be a permanent. If you create table, by default, it will be a permanent. No need to mention anything here. Okay. Because these will inherit the properties from the database. So what is the higher level? Database is the higher level, right? Database, schema. Within the schema, you will have a tables. Database is higher level, right? So from the database, it will inherit how many days of the retention period, and then whether it is a permanent table or whether it is a temporary table or transient table. So you can able to decide. Now this is a permanent. Within this, whatever you are creating, everything is permanent. It can be a schema or it can be a table. Now, if you observe, show schemas, observe this one, schemas here, schemas you can able to retention period by default it is 1. Let it be. And so observe the database. This is the database name. And so is default we have. Let's create a different databases, different schema. Nothing but let's create transient database and so transient schema. And after that we will see the temporary table. Now let's come to this, the implementation. So we have a table types. Come to this. What we can do is we will create transient database. This one, create or replace transient database, database name. When you run this, what you are doing here? See this, the keyword. Which keyword we are using? When you are creating a database, we will use create or replace database, database name, right? But here, what you observed, create or replace, we are mentioning a keyword called transient. See this one, we are mentioning a keyword called transient database. Now, when you run this, just observe what will happen. Created. Now refresh it here. Now you can able to see another database. Now, if you observe, show databases, what you observe this one, this particular database. See this option, transient, default retention period 1, let it be. What it is telling? It is a transient. Now, it's connected to transient database. Once we created a transient database, it's connected to transient database. See this one, transient database public schema. Within this, if you create any schema or if you create any table, by default, it will be a transient. No need to mention because already you connect to the database. Whatever you are going to create under this database, everything will be a transient only. Everything will be transient. Now let's create, for example, the schema inside this. After that, we will create a table. We are creating a schema, create schema, schema name. Observe this one. When you are creating a schema, so are we mentioning transient here? Are we mentioning transient? No, right? When you run this, See this one, created, refresh it, and then see this one, schema is created. But what about this employee schema? Where we created? Under this transient database. Now it will inherit the properties from this transient database to schema. Now check the schema. What is the schema type here? See this employee schema, transient. Public schema, transient. By default, when you created any schemas under the transient database, those are also transient schemas. Now, within this schema, now it's connected to employee schema. If you create any table, what will happen? Table also it will be a transient because we are under transient schema, transient database. Now let's observe this one. So how to create? Now let's just create a table here. Create table, table name, and then column names, data types. When we observe this, are you mentioning any keyword here? Transient? No, right? But observe when you're creating a table, what is happening? Table created, refresh it. Observe the table. See this one, what it is telling within the bracket right side. So it is telling that in the table description, table, and then within the bracket, it is telling it is a transient. So that we can understand. And at the same time, more importantly, observe the icon here. See this one, observe the icon. This is like setting symbol, right? This is we have like a setting symbol. See this one, setting symbol, isn't it? Okay, now let's come to this. If it is a normal table, permanent table, observe this. This looks like this. This is transient table, right? Transient table, you will have this icon. So settings icon. So these permanent tables will not have any icon. Okay, now where we are? We are in transient database, transient schema. Now if you want to create this particular table, transient table, under class database, this is a permanent database, right? Now observe this one. When you create this, sorry, click on and then set as a content. Now it's connected to where it's connected, permanent database, permanent schema, right? Now when you run this here, then what will happen? Where it will be created? Under the class database and under public schema, right? Under public schema. When you run this is a default, right? What is the table it will be created? This is a permanent table. Now, where we are in permanent database, permanent schema, within the permanent database or permanent schema, if you create anything by default, it will be permanent. Now, we want to create a transient table here. Then what you need to do is same thing, copy and come here and we have to mention keyword called transient. See this one. Before we don't then mention because so here it is a transient we are mentioning. Previously, when you created this, we connected to transient database, we connected to transient schema. So no need to mention. But here we are in permanent database, permanent schema. If you create by default, it will inherit the properties from database and schema, right? So here, if you want to specifically mention, you need to create a transient table. Then we have to mention a keyword called transient. Observe this one. When you are running, you can able to see successfully created. Now let's refresh it. Sorry, with the same name I am creating, it will replace that. I will don't want to do that. So let me give employees underscore. I will give trans. Okay. Then we can identify both the tables. Now this is a transient with the same structure. Refresh it now. See this one. Employees permanent table. This is a transient. Observe the icon here. Observe the icon. Now this is for a transient. Now, so let's create temporary. So if you create a temporary, now let's observe this. We'll have, may come to this one. We'll create temporary here. This is related to schema. We done that. Let's come to temporary. See this one. What we are doing? We are creating table employees underscore temporary with same column names, right? When you run this, table is created. What is the keyword we mentioned? Temporary. Temporary keyword we mentioned. Now, when you run this, it's created already. Okay, it's created. Let it observe this. Created. Refresh it here. Now, what you observed? Permanent table, transient table. This is temporary table. This is transient table. Now observe icon for the temporary table. Let me zoom it here. Observe the icon for the temporary table, how it looks like. This is with a clock symbol. This is with a setting symbol, transient, temporary. This is a permanent table, right? These are the table types. Okay. Now, so why you are creating these table types? Based on retention period. That is the one option. Another option is temporary table when you are especially working. This is only for session. It means, so I will tell you the scenario where we can able to use. Now we created a temporary table and let's insert some data into the temporary table. This, we are inserting some data. When you insert some data here, observe this, inserted. Now refresh it. You can able to see the data in the temporary table, right? For example, select star from employees underscore temporary. Now this is the table. Now observe this. When you are running this, what you observed? We have a data. Okay. We have a data. What we discussed, temporary is applicable only for the session. Now here, see this one. What we are doing, when you execute this here, it given the result, right? Now observe this carefully what we are doing. We are moving to new worksheet. New worksheet. Observe this. New worksheet and it's connected to, let's connect it to the same database and schema. It's connected to database and schema. Now check the data here. Same for a temporary table. Now when you run this, observe what happened. What it is telling. This particular table does not exist in class and public schema. Now observe this, whether it is exist or not. See this one. You can see permanent table. You can see the transient table, but not your temporary table, because the temporary table only applicable for a session. Session ID means when you log out and then log in, new session ID will be created. When you come to the new worksheet, new session ID will be created. New worksheet. You can able to see that session IDs in history. Come to the history. When you are running each and every query, you will have two things. One is query ID. That is a unique ID always. Remember this. Query ID means whatever the queries you are running in your workspace, everything in a worksheet and workspace, everything. So each and everything will be created unique. These are the unique query IDs. See this one, unique query IDs. Now, when you open the session today morning, it will create one session ID. Observe session ID here. See this one. You can able to see that session ID. Now, when you run this, when you observe this, let me refresh it here. When I refresh, you can able to see session ID. See this one, session IDs are can be duplicated, right? When you Observe, see this one, this session ID is different, this session ID is different. Why? When you observe this, see this one, which query we ran here, database, and so here SQL, use database class, use database class. This is fine. Okay, now observe this. Select star from class, public, and then temporary. See this, these are the table we have inserted. So when you are doing that, for everything, we have a session ID, right? So when you come to the new window, it means in the worksheet, when you open new window, so when you run this, what will happen? This one will consider as a new session ID. So because of that, if you refresh it here, again you can able to see the session IDs here. Today, okay, see this one. So this is, so time it is showing here, and then observe the session IDs. This is the previous session ID. This is the new session ID, right? New session ID. So when you are what you are doing, select star from table we are using, right? But if you observe here, see this one, it is select star from this particular table, right? Select star from table. So these are the new session IDs. Now these are the previous session ID, right? So when you come here, see this one, when you move to the new worksheet, it will consider it as a new session ID. This, what is a temporary table property? It will applicable for only session. But if you come to the original worksheet and then if you check, still the temporary table is available. And one more thing, temporary tables applicable for only session, and it will be dropped automatically. So when you log out and then log in, see this, we have still we can able to see the temporary table. We can able to see the data, right? When I log out and then log in, observe this, what will happen? Log out and we will log in. Refresh it. Can you able to see the table? No. Can you able to see the table? In any worksheet, you cannot able to see the table because temporary table is automatically, it will drop out when you log out the session and then when you log in. And so this is only applicable for the session. Okay, that is the main intention behind the temporary table. Okay, that is fine. But what is the purpose of this? When you want to drop it, then why you need to create it in the database, right? The intention behind that permanent, so temporary table is, suppose sometimes what will happen, we will create backup tables, right? If you want to test something, you will create a backup table. So let's assume that we have a EMP table, you want to do some changes on this particular table. What you will do is, instead of doing the changes on this table, you are going to do all the changes on, we will create another table like a backup table. This is our best practice in normal traditional databases, right? We will create a backup table and then we will implement the changes here, and then we will do the validations. Like suppose you have updated something, you will see that how the updates is done. So whether it is everything is perfect or not, you will do the validation. Then whatever the changes you have implemented, if it is tested in a backup table, then you are going to implement the same changes on your original table, right? This is the concept of backup table, right? When you do this, let's assume that in your Snowflake account, 7 members or 7 to 10 members team are working. If everyone they are creating their own tables, then what will happen? Storage will be increased, right? So once you have tested, so once you know that, okay, this is just for the temporary purpose I am creating, for my testing purpose I am creating, then what you have to do? When you do that, see this. So when you are working with that, so this one backup table you will create as temporary table. You know that this table we don't require after the testing, after today, after the session. Then what you can do is you can create it as a temporary table. You can create it as a temporary table. So then, for example, let's assume that this table is having 1 GB data. When you create a temporary table also, you will have 1 GB data, right? When you are doing some testing, if it is like this, then unnecessary we are occupying space, right? Space is occupying. And so maybe in traditional databases, you may observe every 3 months once or 6 months once, they will send a email communication like these are the unused tables. Unused tables is available in our database. Okay, due to space issue, we are going to drop all the tables. If anyone using, please let us know. Right? These emails you will receive it from the admins in traditional thing, right? Traditional databases. But here, to overcome that, we have a option called temporary table. That is the main intention behind temporary. See this, what happened here also. Once you log out and then log in, the table is gone. Table is gone. And one more thing. So this syntax, so in interviews also they will ask, so is that a correct syntax? Create a table, create or replace table, permanent. If they mention permanent, there is no keyword called permanent in your Snowflake. See this one, keyword is not available. Remember, if you don't mention anything, then that will be a permanent only based on the schema. If you don't mention, so whether this is a uh, permanent table, so no need to mention. Okay, if it is a transient or if it is a temporary, then only you need to mention. If you don't mention, by default it will be a permanent tables, and permanent tables and then transient tables will be dropped by default. It will be available until you drop. And another difference, what is the difference between permanent and transient? See this, we have create. Okay, let me create a temporary table also. We will insert some data. Now you can able to see the data here in this temporary table. So this one temporary table until you log out and log in. This table will be available. After that, anyway, it will be dropped. So this one, so when you observe this, when you come to the new worksheet, it will not be available, right? Now observe this, when you show tables, whatever the tables we created, okay, based on date, for temporary tables, transient tables, permanent tables. Now observe the kind, what you observed, temporary, transient, permanent. If it is a table, yes, that is a permanent. And observe the retention period, what we discussed. Retention period is by default, it will be 1. See this, retention period is by default, it will be 1. When your table is having some data, then it contains active bytes, some number in a active bytes. This is nothing but a storage. Now this is a retention period, right? 1. And then you have, so all the 3 types of tables. Now temporary, we understand, when you sign out and then log in, it will be dropped. But what is the exact difference between temporary and permanent? Permanent tables will have fail safe option. It means if you come to account, observe this, come to the account and click on average storage used, you can able to see this one, databases, stages, fail safe. See this one, whatever the permanent table you are going to create, by default the fail safe option it will be there. Fail safe will be 7 days period. Just remember that 7 days period. When it will be applicable? After 90 days retention period, if you need more 7 more days, by default it will be available in your fail safe option. In your fail safe option. Okay, just remember this. Now you can able to see the fail safe. This is only for permanent tables. It is not whatever the tables till now we created. So every table is a permanent only, right? That's why you can able to see the fail safe here in this particular thing. So fail safe, you can able to see the data. This failsafe is applicable only for permanent tables, not for your transient tables. Remember that, not for your transient tables. Until you drop, transient table will be available. It will be contains 1 day retention period, default, and then maximum. So minimum can be 0. Minimum can be 0. Based on retention period, you can go back and then you can get the snapshot of that particular table. That is the main intention behind retention period. At the same time, we can able to restore the data within that retention period. By mistake something you have dropped, you can able to restore the data. For example, if you give 5 days before or 1 week retention period, today you have dropped, within 1 week you can able to get back that, you can able to restore back. If you give 30 days, within the 30 days, suppose if I dropped today by mistake, within 30 days I have identified, maybe it has been dropped in some particular day. So then if you observe, if you try to restore, you can able to get it back. But after the retention period, it is not possible. After the retention period, to get back that table, it is not possible. Okay, just remember these things. These are the different table types what we are having. By seeing the icon itself, you can able to understand. And so within this permanent database, you can able to create any kind of table. Now one question here, now we have a transient database, right? This is a transient database. Can you able to create permanent under the transient database or transient schema? Not possible, right? Permanent means without mentioning any keyword, then it will be created as a permanent table. Now if I connect it to this particular transient database, transient schema, if I create anything like this, by default it will be a transient table only, because you are under transient schema. You are under transient schema. The question is, under transient schema, under transient database, can we able to create permanent table? If you create, if you don't mention anything, that will be a permanent. But where we are under the transient, if you do anything here, always it will be transient only, right? Because the database or schema is transient. See this one, I will give underscore to identification. We are not giving any keyword here, right? But even though it will be a transient only. Now observe this we saw that, right? Refresh it again. So we will have another table where we created transient underscore employees underscore trn under db transient public schema. Now come to the public schema. See this one, transient table, right? But we didn't mention a keyword. Same way, but if you want to create a permanent, not possible. Can you able to create a temporary under transient database and transient? That is possible, right? That is possible. So because that is a down level, right? First permanent, transient, temporary, right? Now if you try to create temp, let me give, yeah, already here we have, right? Now observe this, where we are creating this particular thing, we are creating under transient database, transient schema. What you are trying to create? Temporary table. We are trying to create a temporary. It is possible. Now when you refresh it, see this one in the public schema, you can able to see a temporary table, right? Under the transient databases, you cannot able to create permanent tables. Remaining things you can able to do that. Now, so in the next session, what we will do is we will see how the retention period will work. Now here, if you observe, whatever the tables we created, all the tables, the retention period is, all the schemas, all the tables retention period is, by default, it is 1. See this one, retention period, by default, it is 1, right? For the databases, for the schemas, and everywhere, the retention is 1. Show databases, here also the retention is 1. And then when you come to the show schemas, always retention period is 1 here, right? You can able to see all this retention period is by default, it is 1, right? Now, if you want to change the retention period, how to do that? And then how to go back to time travel, how to check the time travel option. It means, so now, so this particular table, I have done some changes in, so last week. Today, if I check the data, so I can see the data here and how it looks like here, right? But I want to go back and then I want to see, so how the data looks like 1 week before. Like another example I will give you, you can go to your bank statement, right? For example, if you have a bank account details, so you can go to your portal. If you want to check 1 week before bank statement, you can able to go back and check. You can able to see, you want to see your transaction, so 3 months before, you can able to see that. But based on how many days of the bank statement you can able to go, so that they will decide in a portal. If they decide only 2 months, you can go back and then you can check only up to 2 months. If they decided only 3 months, you can able to see all your transactions. These 3 months only you can go, you can see the data in a bank test statement, you can download. If you need more than that, what you will do, you, if you don't have option in a portal, you will go to the bank and then you will ask them, right? In the portal they have given only limitation for 1 month or 2 months or 3 months. Based on that only you can go back and then you can check the bank statement, not more than that. If they defined only 3 months, 3 months only. If they defined 6 months, 6 months only. Just the example I am giving. The same way, we are going to define a retention period here. How many days go back you can go and then you can check the data. Okay, we will see that practically in the next session, how to work with retention and then how to work with our time travel option. Okay, this is very important. Please practice different scenarios, how to create a permanent table, temporary table, transient table, permanent database, temporary database, permanent schema. So and then so transient schema. Temporary is not available for the database. So remember this one. Okay, temporary database will not be there, so temporary schema will not be there, only transient. So database, transient schema, permanent database, permanent schema. Okay, so we will see that in the next session. Okay, any questions? Let me check in the questions. Okay, sorry for that, I didn't observe initially. Okay, any questions here from anyone? I will send you the same scripts to you. So please practice at least 1 or 2 times. This is very important topic in Snowflake. And one thing, blindly remember one thing, in environments, right? When we will anyway, we will come to that again also. In environments, dev environment, test environment, always you will have transient. In only in production environment, you will have temporary. Blindly just remember this. Again, we will discuss also in the next sessions. Any other questions?
Sir, I have a question.
Yes, Lata, tell me.
Um, it's like while we are loading the data from stage area to the table,
Mm-hmm.
there we use copy command,
Mm,
right? There we use
correct. Mm,
validation method,
mm,
and
correct.
if if there is any error, then we'll go with on
Mm,
error
correct.
on error command.
Correct.
If
Mm,
if it is a valid data, then the valid data will be loaded. If it is not valid, then um,
mm. It will not load.
yeah, you told
Mm,
us like we have to use some select
mm,
statement using query ID,
correct.
right?
Validate option. Mm,
Yeah. Um,
mm,
could you tell us, like, I'm confused about that query ID. I mean, which query ID we need to
mm.
use to
I
get
will
the
tell you.
invalid records?
Mm. So suppose I ran this particular query. Observe this one. When I am mentioning this, suppose I am trying to insert the data into this table, right? When I run this, let's assume that this is the query. When I run this, for every query when we are running, you will have a query ID in the backend. Now it is inserted, right? If I check open history, see this one, this is the query ID. If you want to see the more information, come to the history and click on this query ID. Observe this one.
Okay.
See this. By seeing this, you can understand which is the query ID. Insert. We are inserting this query ID. You have to pick. Right, the same way when you are using copy command, so you will have a copy command query ID will be there. This query ID you have to pick. Got it right?
Okay. That copy command, it's like you
Mm,
showed us like valid method and using
correct.
on error method.
Correct.
And so, I mean, which query ID we should use
Mm,
there?
mm. So when you are using on error, now observe this one. For example, this one we have used, and then this one we have used, and then copy into, let me come here. Somewhere it will be there. Let me come here. Observe this one. This is you are talking about, right?
Yes, yes, yes.
So this one on error equal to continue. So what is the query ID for this? This is the query ID for this. This query ID you have to use.
Okay,
Understand, right?
okay,
Okay.
okay.
For every query when you are running, you will have a query ID. Okay.
Okay.
This is a unique
I
query
mean,
ID.
if I use this query ID, then we will
Mm,
get invalid records, right? You mean to
exactly.
say?
Invalid records in this particular execution.
Okay,
Okay. Mm,
okay,
cool.
okay, sir, got it. Thank you. And I
Thank
have
you.
one more question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Um, it's like actually I'm creating the table by
Mm,
uh, using user interface.
okay.
Not like it's like create table. I'm not writing the query. I
Mm,
just
fine.
you told us, right?
Mm,
Told
mm,
us like create the
any
table, right?
yes, yes.
So
Anyway you can
they,
use. Mm,
yeah, there we can create the table, and
mm,
the thing is for the EMPID something
mm, mm,
there we can directly go for integer and string. But the thing
mm,
is for the integer, like if I have to specify 3 or 5, where I
mm,
can
mm.
specify that?
Length,
Because
right? You are talking
yes,
about
yes,
length.
length. Yeah, yeah, length.
If you want to specify the length, you have to come here in the worksheet and then you will specify. Next, we will see that. See this one here, what you are doing. Length we are
Yeah,
specifying,
yes,
right?
yes, yes,
Here we
yes,
are specifying. But here, when you are doing that by using this particular option, right?
yes.
It will automatically, it will take the default length. So here
Okay,
you will not have a option. That
okay,
will take default length by default.
okay, okay. Then we should use, I mean, only user interface if you want to.
Correct.
Uh,
Exactly. If you want to specify, we have to use user interface.
oh, thank you, sir.
Good. Any other questions from anyone? Okay, guys, please practice and let me know if you have any questions. Well, thank you. We'll connect tomorrow. Bye.
Thank you.